First of all, that is a total misread. You cannot call a San Diego and a Dodger fan without their permission. I think you've misread this one, Mr. Chairman, and this is something on which we should be able to agree, actually.
Stand corrected.
To respond to Mr. Shimkus, I actually think this is about the least intrusive way for government to promote energy efficiency by sort of setting the table for consumers to have the information that they need to make a decision about whether they want to invest in energy efficiency. And Mr. Shimkus decided in his own, no one required him to buy the fancy washing machine, but you had the information to make that choice yourself. And I think it's actually very valuable and non-intrusive. So my question goes to that, though, which is about the certification. And Mr. Johnson, I got to read over your testimony, and you said that in 2011, they switched from this to this self-certification. We don't have the agency here. Can you tell me, if they were sitting here, why they would explain that they did that in 2011 to switch away from self-certification?
Sure. As
mandated a third-party certification regime for products.
Right. As Kateri Callahan referenced earlier, EPA around that time was dealing with a couple of challenges or issues with the program. One had to do with the database that was used at the time to administer the list of Energy Star qualified products, and that database essentially was fooled by a third-party audit that uploaded the famous gas-powered alarm clocks, right? So it was an egregious and a well-publicized situation with a database on the administrative side of the program. The other challenge, as I understand, had to do with a product the product category outside of our industry in the refrigerator category. Perhaps Mr. McGuire can shed further light than I can. But in any case, it was a discrete issue in a category of product outside of our industry. The response by EPA was very public and very broad, and the blanket of third-party certification went over everybody, even though at the time in their press release, EPA acknowledged that electronics had this 100% track record of compliance.
Let me ask you, though, about, so what would you do in the case of fraud? So let's just say that there's the self-certification, someone pats themselves on the back for meeting a spec that they don't, in fact, meet.
So I think the penalties should be there.
What would be the penalty?
In the language in the discussion draft, or
in your mind, what would be the rate?
Well, I think we favor the approach that's in this discussion draft, which on one hand allows the good actors to earn their way out, but if there's a screw up, I think in at least 2 instances, then they're back under third-party certification for at least 3 years. So I think
there's no penalty to them for all the products that they sold potentially fraudulently. In other words, just next time you have to have a certification. Is that the way you'd advocate it?
Well, in terms of allowing a focus on the new market entrants or the bad actors, I think that's really important. But for the good actors who've had that demonstrated track record of compliance, allow them to earn their way out. I think EPA or DOE would maintain the oversight of the program and essentially kick the parties out that would violate. I think there's also the consumer response as well, and there are a lot of publications and other parties that watch this space, and please note that the manufacturers have equity in this brand as well. It's a partnership fundamentally.
I'm very sympathetic, actually, particularly in your industry where things turn over so fast. My concern is that without the certification, and I'm not trying to answer the question, I'm trying to ask it, is without certification, as we go forward with this draft, how can we be confident that the standards will actually have been met? And I guess that's what I'd look at too. For myself, I also don't understand why this is not an Energy Department program. It does seem to me where that is where the expertise relies. I don't have an objection to that part of the bill. I'm not sure why EPA is the better one to set standards than the Department of Energy, but I just, with a limited amount of time I have, I just expressed the concern I have about compliance, and not that I'm an advocate for litigation, but if you left the third-party certification out there, why you wouldn't want to have some sort of hammer? I don't know. You want to respond to that?
Yes, sir. The other note I wanted to make was with respect to marketplace verification post-market. When the products are on the store shelves, labeled as Energy Star, very important to keep that going. And the solution to third-party certification, which is a pre-market exercise, is distinct and separate from post-market verification. So that would be the check,
Okay.
the random testing of products on store shelves.
And I think there'd have to be some sort of penalties in place for actual fraud.
There are penalties.
I'm,
I mean,
I'm out of
EPA
my time, ma'am, so, but I'm sure maybe that someone else will ask you. Thank you. I yield back.